Emily Parker thought she had found comfort in Tyler Grant's arms, while Daniel Reed believed he could quietly rebuild his life with LeVar Morgan, but none of them knew they were being played in a deadly game orchestrated from the shadows. A love triangle so twisted it would end in betrayal, manipulation, and murder. Emily Parker and Daniel Reed were the kind of couple that people envied. Their home, nestled in a peaceful North Carolina suburb, was the picture of stability. But he always had excuses. Meetings, deadlines, exhaustion. Over time, her efforts faded. She stopped trying to pull him back. She stopped hoping. Emily, with her warm smile and gentle voice, taught English at the local high school, while Daniel, tall and soft-spoken, worked as an architect at a respected firm in the city. They hosted the occasional game night, attended charity events, and smiled in photos. Emily found a receipt tucked inside Daniel's jacket, a dinner for two at a restaurant miles away from town. The name on the reservation wasn't his. It was a woman's. She stared at it for minutes, her heart pounding, unsure of what she was looking at. She didn't confront him. She just placed the receipt back and waited. A part of her didn't want to know the truth. Another part already did. One evening, after a particularly long walk, she didn't come straight home. Daniel was unaware. Or maybe he suspected something but chose to ignore it. He had his own distractions. A few months earlier, he had reconnected with an old college flame, Lavra. It started with a message on social media, then coffee, then dinners. Lavra was successful, attractive, and just as emotionally detached as he was. They talked about life, work, regrets. Daniel didn't mean for it to happen either, but one night it did. He cheated, and like Emily, he didn't stop. She stayed out, ignoring her phone, lost in Tyler's world. She told herself it was innocent, that she just needed to feel something again. But that feeling turned into something more. Her body responded before her mind could catch up. She crossed a line she never thought she would. But those smiles were rehearsed. At home, they slept on opposite sides of the bed. She was out more often, returning home late with vague explanations. Lost in affairs that gave them what they believed was missing. Yet neither wanted to be the first to end the marriage. The house, the routine, the shared history, it was all too heavy to throw away. So they continued the charade, smiling for neighbors, waving at mailmen, hosting small gatherings. The foundation beneath them had already cracked, but they stood on it anyway. She seemed distracted, but not in the way he remembered. They didn't he realize was that the secrets they were hiding weren't just dangerous, they were explosive. And someone, somewhere, had already begun to light the fuse. It became a ritual just before sunset, when the sky was golden and the streets were quiet. She would walk aimlessly, listening to music or the birds or nothing at all. It was on one of those walks that she met him, a man sitting outside a small bookstore she'd never noticed before. He looked up, smiled, and asked her about the book in her hand. She responded without thinking, and they began to talk. There was an energy about her, a kind of restlessness that made him uneasy. He said he worked part-time at the store and spent the rest of his time writing. There was something disarming about him, something easy. Their first conversation lasted 20 minutes. The next day they talked again. Soon it became routine. Emily found herself walking that way more often, lingering a little longer each time. She started to laugh again, to blush at compliments. Tyler was everything Daniel wasn't: attentive, curious, unpredictable. One night she came home humming. He hadn't heard her hum in years and rarely spoke unless necessary. There were no blow-ups or accusations, just a quiet unraveling. They lived like strangers under one roof, two lives running parallel, never touching. He wasn't blind to their problems, but he felt too tired to fix them. The spark was gone, and he didn't know how to bring it back. He told himself it was a phase, that all long-term relationships go through it, but deep down he had already given up. The attention he once gave to Emily shifted elsewhere toward his work, his fitness, his phone. The silence between them became normal, comforting even. They had been married for 6 years, and most who met them assumed they were still in love, still connected, still happy. From holiday photos to cheerful neighborhood barbecues, they looked like the definition of a perfect marriage. But perfection has a way of hiding what lies underneath. Behind closed doors, their lives were drifting apart in slow, subtle ways. Emily noticed it first. The late-night dinners were replaced with silence and takeout boxes. Weekends that once involved spontaneous road trips turned into quiet evenings spent in separate rooms. Daniel buried himself in blueprints and emails. Emily found herself staying later at school, grading papers she had already looked over twice. It wasn't that they argued. They didn't fight, scream, or slam doors. It was worse than that. It was distance, the kind that creeps in quietly and lingers. At first, Emily tried to reconnect. She planned dinner dates, suggested weekend getaways, even bought concert tickets to Daniel's favorite band. Daniel, for his part, noticed Emily withdrawing but didn't push. Neighbors still waved when they passed. To everyone else, the Reeds were doing just fine. Things took a sharper turn in early June. Meanwhile, Daniel started noticing changes in Emily too. She began dressing differently, more carefully, more confidently. Still, neither of them said a word. In her isolation, Emily started taking long walks around the neighborhood. His name was Tyler Grant. He was younger, maybe in his late 20s, with a boyish face and sharp, thoughtful eyes. It wasn't long before their connection deepened. Back at home, so the perfect couple became something else entirely. Both were leading double lives, what? Tyler Grant appeared in Emily's life like a spark in the dark. He was magnetic in ways she hadn't felt in years. He had moved into a rented apartment above the bookstore just 2 months before they met. Nobody seemed to know much about him. The landlord said he was quiet, paid rent in cash, and kept mostly to himself. No friends visited, no packages arrived. His social media profiles were bare. Still, he blended into the background easily, and in a suburb like theirs, that was enough to avoid suspicion. Emily didn't even know where he had grown up. He was tangled in his own secret life with Lavra. They had reignited their old flame quickly and with little hesitation. Lavra had always been direct, and her feelings for Daniel never truly went away. She hated small talk, had a sharp tongue, and never pretended to be soft. Daniel admired that about her. With her, he felt like someone else, stronger, freer, wanted. What he didn't realize was that Laura's interest wasn't entirely about love. She had her own reasons for coming back into his life, ones she kept hidden behind well-timed affection. Attached was a candid photo of Emily and Tyler holding hands by the bookstore. Another message showed them together in a car. Daniel stared at the images in disbelief. At first, he assumed someone was playing a cruel joke, but the more he looked, the more real it became. He didn't confront Emily. Instead, he spiraled inward, furious not just at her, but at the fact that she had managed to hide it so well. He dismissed questions with jokes or vague answers. He claimed to be working on a novel, but she never saw him write. Still, she didn't press. Lavra noticed his tension and pushed him to leave Emily entirely. Tyler wasn't just a rebound or a temporary escape. He had been watching Daniel, too. He knew where he worked, what car he drove, where he liked to eat. And Lavra, the woman who had re-entered Daniel's life so suddenly, wasn't a coincidence either, but everything had. And in the background, the trap was already being set. She and Tyler had met long before Emily ever knew his name. She said it was time to stop pretending. Daniel considered it seriously for the first time. The marriage was dead. There was nothing left to save. He came home later and later. Emily stopped asking questions. He assumed she was numb, checked out, or simply tired of the marriage. He didn't know she was already miles away from him in her mind and in Tyler's arms. Tyler and Lavra were moving the pieces, and each move brought the Reeds closer to a collision neither of them saw coming. She didn't want to risk breaking the illusion he had so carefully crafted for her. Love, or what felt like it, made her overlook the gaps. The image was grainy but clear enough. Emily's heart raced. Instead, he told her to collect everything, prepare herself emotionally, and strike when it would hurt most. Emily was skeptical at first, but Tyler had a way of making her feel smart, capable, strategic. She began documenting Daniel's absences. She tracked his schedule. She played the role of the quiet, unsuspecting wife while quietly building a case in her mind. She recognized Lavra instantly from old photos on Daniel's social media, taken long before they got married. More messages followed, a voice recording. A screenshot of an email. The sender never revealed themselves. Emily assumed it was a concerned friend or someone who had seen Daniel around town. At first, he seemed almost too good to be true. He spoke with confidence but never arrogance, listened without interrupting, and remembered small details she didn't think she had even said out loud. The more time Emily spent with him, the more she felt seen, heard, and wanted. Tyler didn't just admire her. He studied her, mirrored her moods, made her laugh at herself. It was intoxicating. He gave her attention in all the ways Daniel had forgotten how. What Emily didn't know was that Tyler wasn't entirely new to the neighborhood. Tyler watched Emily before she ever spoke to him. He saw her walking alone in the evenings, always at the same time, always with a faraway look in her eyes. He positioned himself near the bookstore entrance day after day until their paths crossed naturally. He wasn't shy. He was strategic. What started as small talk about books quickly turned into deeper conversations about life, love, and betrayal. Emily confided in him at first vaguely, then with full honesty. She told him about Daniel's distance, about her loneliness, about the receipt she had found. Tyler listened like a man taking notes. He was gentle with his words, never too pushy, always offering just enough sympathy to keep her coming back. Their meetings grew more frequent and deliberate. She felt alive. When Tyler reached for her hand one evening, she didn't pull away. And when he leaned in days later, she didn't hesitate. The affair wasn't planned, but it didn't feel wrong to her either. She felt justified Daniel had started it. She was only reacting. Tyler made Emily feel empowered. For the first time in a long time, she stopped seeing herself as the quiet, forgotten wife. But Tyler's attention came with shadows. He rarely talked about his own life. Meanwhile, Daniel remained oblivious to the full extent of her change. Daniel began spending nights at Lavra's condo in the city under the guise of late work meetings. Then the messages began. Emily was the first to receive them. A text came one morning from an unknown number, a photo of Daniel seated across from a woman in a sleek restaurant. She shared everything with Tyler. He listened calmly and encouraged her not to confront Daniel immediately. At the same time, Daniel started getting messages too. An anonymous email arrived in his work inbox with the subject line, "Your wife's new friend." He started questioning everything. Every late return, every sudden change in mood, every quiet evening spent apart. He began doubting his own sense of control. But behind the scenes, neither Emily nor Daniel knew the full picture. It was no accident that they had both slipped into the lives of the Reeds at the same time. It was planned. While Emily and Daniel thought they were navigating private affairs, they were already caught in something much larger. And still, the perfect couple smiled in public, attended functions, and waved at neighbors as if nothing had changed. It all came crashing down on a cool October morning. Emily's phone buzzed just before her first class. The message was brief, but the image attached shattered whatever illusions she had left. It was Daniel, unmistakably him, sitting beside Lavra at a cafe she didn't recognize. They were laughing. Lavra had her hand on his. The timestamp showed it had been taken the night before. This one showed Lavra leaving Daniel's office. She was alone, looking over her shoulder. Again, no sender, no explanation. Emily's stomach turned. Who was watching them? Inside were printed photos of Emily and Tyler, candid shots taken from a distance. Lavra poured him a drink, waited for him to speak, and then told him something unexpected. She suggested he cut ties completely. Leave the house, file for divorce, and walk away. She said it with such certainty that Daniel began to believe it was the only option left. One showed them walking hand in hand. Another was more intimate. Emily sitting in Tyler's lap, her face turned toward his. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. Emily stared at it for minutes, her fingers trembling. The rage crept up slowly, crawling through her chest and tightening around her throat. She said Tyler was probably a fake name, maybe a drifter or someone trying to scam Emily, but her body language betrayed her. Daniel noticed the shift in her voice, the slight hesitation. Tyler kept urging her to take back control, to stop letting Daniel manipulate her. He started planting ideas, small ones at first. What if Daniel was planning to leave the country? Just to confront him, just to scare him. Emily didn't want to go that far, but the fear, the anger, and the betrayal were too loud now. She said yes. What if he was hiding money? What if he wanted full custody of everything they had built? A small, worn-down place just outside town, tucked deep in the woods where no one would think to look. Tyler said he'd scout the area and wait nearby. Emily rehearsed her message to Daniel carefully. Calm, legal, no emotion. A feeling crept into his gut that he couldn't shake. She felt betrayed, exposed, and foolish. All the late nights, all the silence, none of it had been her imagination. To how conveniently she had reached out after all these years, but curiosity or guilt or maybe pride made him agree. He didn't know that by saying yes, he had just stepped into a trap carefully built over weeks. One made from shadows, silence, and lies, to how smoothly she'd slipped back into his life. And suddenly it all felt too neat, too perfect. One message to Emily read, "He's lying to you. He's always been lying." Emily would lure Daniel there under the pretense of divorce paperwork. Tyler would be nearby, just in case. Another to Daniel said, "She's setting you up. Get out now." Daniel hadn't just checked out, he had replaced her. Emily began to doubt whether Daniel would ever sign the divorce papers. One last time to look Daniel in the eye and ask him why. But deep down, she knew this wasn't about answers anymore. It was about control, about not being the victim. A few searches revealed inconsistencies, no published writing. No online footprint, no mention of employment before the bookstore. He called the shop one evening, pretending to ask about a book. When he casually mentioned Tyler, the man on the phone hesitated before answering, saying Tyler had stopped showing up weeks ago. Daniel began to wonder if Emily would try to destroy his career. She found herself checking the windows at night, jumping at every notification, avoiding calls from unknown numbers. She started sleeping less and thinking more about her marriage, her mistakes, her loneliness, and her rage. Tyler fed those thoughts. He told her she had been used, discarded, replaced. He told her Daniel was dangerous, that he'd take everything in the divorce and leave her with nothing. They were locked in a silent war fueled by someone neither of them could see. She didn't speak to Daniel that night. She didn't even bring up the photo. Instead, she spent hours walking in circles through the neighborhood, her mind replaying every red flag she had ignored. When she returned, Daniel was asleep or pretending to be. She sat in the kitchen, staring at her phone, scrolling through messages with Tyler, wondering how much of it had been real. Tyler was quick to respond when she finally told him about the photo. He was supportive, telling her she deserved better, telling her she was brave for enduring everything she had. But there was something more in his tone that night, something colder. He wasn't just angry on her behalf. He seemed personally offended, like Daniel's betrayal had wounded him too. Tyler offered to handle it. Emily laughed it off. She didn't want trouble. Just clarity, but clarity didn't come. The next morning, a new message arrived, another image. When she asked Tyler if he'd sent it, he denied it. Said it must have been someone else, maybe a mutual friend who had seen enough to step in. But something didn't sit right with Emily. Tyler had too much information about Daniel's habits, about his work schedule, about places Emily hadn't mentioned visiting. She wondered briefly if she had been followed too. That same week, Daniel received a package at work. Inside was a manila envelope. No return address. He didn't confront Emily. Instead, he went to Laura's condo and collapsed onto her couch in silence. But the messages kept coming, for both of them. The tone shifted, no longer just evidence of affairs, but threats. Neither of them shared the new messages with each other. They both assumed the other had gone too far. And all the while, Tyler and Lavra remained just out of reach. Emily's mental state started to crack. Meanwhile, Daniel began digging into Tyler's background. It didn't take much effort to realize that Tyler wasn't who he claimed to be. Daniel's stomach turned. He confronted Lavra. She deflected. He started thinking back to how Lavra had reappeared. Emily, unaware of Daniel's suspicions, was spiraling deeper into paranoia. Eventually, Tyler suggested a plan. Not to hurt Daniel, he said. Tyler promised to take care of everything. He would arrange a private meeting place out of town, somewhere quiet. Emily agreed. She told herself it would be one last confrontation. The cabin was chosen. When Daniel received it, he hesitated. It felt off, and someone somewhere was already watching? Already waiting. The cabin stood alone, wrapped in silence and surrounded by the tall trees of a forgotten woodland road. It hadn't been used in years. Its windows were cloudy with dust, and its wooden steps creaked under weight. Tyler had found it through someone he claimed owed him a favor. Tyler insisted they weren't going to hurt him. It was just a scare tactic. Emily wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. He told Emily no one would come out there, not for days, maybe weeks. She didn't ask questions. By then, her mind was too tangled with fear and adrenaline to focus on anything except the plan. Her hands trembled as she organized the pages. Every sound outside made her jump. She glanced at her phone over and over, but there were no new messages. The table between them felt like a barrier. She started talking about the marriage, about trust, about lies. She felt like he was holding something back. Then he leaned forward and asked a question that made her blood run cold. She said she knew about Lavra, about the dinners, the nights away. Daniel didn't argue. He just listened. He seemed calmer than she expected. Tyler had disappeared into the woods behind the cabin, saying he would stay out of sight. That Tyler didn't exist, no records, no job history, nothing that added up. And that Lavra had known Tyler before all of this, maybe still did. He carried a small black duffel bag. She didn't ask what was inside. She arrived early. It was late afternoon, and the sun filtered through the trees in long golden shafts. The air was still, thick with tension. She tried to play dumb, but Daniel's eyes didn't move. He told her he'd received photos, emails. He said someone had been following both of them, watching, documenting, and now he suspected Tyler wasn't who he said he was. Tyler was already inside, pacing the floor with the calm focus of someone preparing for something final. He had brought gloves, wipes, and tools Emily didn't recognize. She had promised she wouldn't cause a scene. She had written it carefully, just enough formality to convince him it was genuine. Daniel didn't reply immediately. No signal. She tried to drag Daniel's body, but he was too heavy. At some point, she collapsed beside Daniel's body and passed out. He approached the cabin and found the door ajar. Inside, he saw the blood, the motionless body, and the woman curled up on the floor. Her hands were shaking, her thoughts scattered. She didn't know what to do. Tyler had vanished. Her story didn't make sense. She claimed someone had attacked them both. She couldn't remember the details. The detectives noted inconsistencies but withheld judgment. They searched the area, but there was no sign of Tyler, no fingerprints, no personal belongings left behind. Only the faint impression of boots leading into the forest and disappearing into the mud. The only sound was her own breathing and the quiet rustle of wind in the trees. But when he finally did, he agreed. No questions asked. He said he'd be there by 6. The sound echoed through the room, a sickening crack. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the skull. Investigators found blood on the table, on Emily's clothes, and on the floor near the door. They found no defensive wounds on Daniel's body. He didn't speak. He looked at Daniel, then at Emily, then back again. Daniel stood up slowly. His expression hardened. He asked Tyler who he really was. Who had sent the messages? Who had taken the photos? Why had both Emily and Daniel been targeted? Tyler didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward and placed his duffel bag on the floor. Emily stood up too, her voice breaking as she asked Tyler what he was doing. He didn't answer her either. He told her everything was under control, that he'd be nearby if anything went wrong. She didn't want to know what that meant. Daniel reached for his phone. Tyler shoved him. The phone dropped. Daniel pushed back. A scuffle broke out quick, brutal, and clumsy. Emily screamed for them to stop. She didn't want this. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Her job was simple: get Daniel to come inside, keep him calm, and make him talk. She turned to Tyler, who stood frozen, breathing hard. He didn't speak. Then, without a word, he grabbed his bag and ran out the back door into the woods. She had sent Daniel a message 2 days earlier asking him to meet her privately to sign papers, away from lawyers and noise. Emily waited in the main room of the cabin, sitting on a wooden chair at a small table covered in legal documents she had printed out. At 5:57 p.m., Daniel's car pulled up. He stepped out slowly, scanning the trees. The cabin looked out of place, too quiet, too isolated. He hesitated before approaching. Something didn't feel right, but he pushed the thought aside. He wanted closure, and he wanted answers. He stepped inside and found Emily already seated. She looked pale, like she hadn't slept. Daniel didn't speak at first. He just closed the door behind him and waited. The silence stretched thin. Emily gestured to the papers. She asked him to sit. He did, carefully, but his calm unnerved her. "Who is Tyler?" Her heart skipped. She didn't answer right away. Emily's chest tightened. She looked toward the window, hoping for some sign of Tyler. Nothing. Daniel continued. He told her he had been digging. That's when the door creaked open behind Daniel. Emily's breath caught. Tyler stepped in, wearing the gloves. The tension exploded in an instant. Daniel moved to leave, but Tyler blocked the door. But then Daniel hit his head against the corner of the table. Everything froze. Daniel collapsed. Emily rushed to him, calling his name, shaking him. There was blood. His eyes didn't move. He didn't respond. Emily was alone. Panic took over. She scrambled for her phone. She stayed in the cabin for hours, pacing, crying, whispering apologies to no one. The next morning, a hunter walking near the woods noticed the car parked near the old trail. Police arrived within an hour. Emily was taken to the hospital. She was incoherent, trembling, covered in dirt and blood. Back at the station, Daniel's identity was confirmed. Emily was arrested 2 days later, charged with manslaughter. But even as the case seemed closed, pieces didn't fit. It wouldn't be until weeks later that a name surfaced. Not Tyler, but Benjamin Lowe, and the story was far from over. It took weeks before the pieces started falling into place, and even then, the full picture was darker than anyone had imagined. After Emily's arrest, investigators began combing through phone records, financial statements, and surveillance footage. Emily's version of events was fragmented, but consistent in one detail: someone else had been there. Someone named Tyler. At first, investigators assumed Tyler was just an excuse, a way for Emily to shift the blame. But Henley wanted to be thorough. She began searching for Tyler Grant in employment records, state IDs, anything that could verify his existence. He had been involved in multiple fraud schemes, identity theft, and one case involving stalking, though charges were dropped. His last known address was in Texas, but he had vanished from the system 2 years ago. The image was taken 7 years earlier during a business conference in Chicago. They weren't just acquaintances, they were close, side by side, laughing. Investigators pulled hotel records, and sure enough, Lavra and Benjamin had stayed in the same room for 3 nights. Lavra had never mentioned knowing Benjamin. The closer they looked, the clearer it became Benjamin had intentionally entered Emily's life under false pretenses. But the question was, why? She claimed she had met Benjamin once, briefly, through a friend, but the timeline told a different story. Bank records showed deposits made to Laura's account shortly after Daniel's death. Large ones, all in cash. She claimed it was inheritance money from an aunt. That lie didn't hold up for long. She convinced Benjamin to assume a fake identity and get close to Emily. Her defense argued that she had been groomed and manipulated, that Benjamin had orchestrated every step. Psychologists testified about coercion, emotional dependency. He left the next morning before sunrise. Since then, there's been nothing, no credit activity, no phone pings, the perfect stranger, always one step ahead, no digital trail. His face appeared on crime shows and news reports for months. Tips poured in, but none led to him. He disappeared as easily as he had appeared, and how Benjamin had isolated her from reality. The prosecution reduced the charges. She pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 4 years in prison, of which she served 3. The goal was to fracture the marriage beyond repair, first emotionally, then physically. It was more than just a love triangle. It was a slow, deliberate game of manipulation that fed off trust, emotion, and vulnerability. A trap built by people who wore masks, smiled kindly, and knew exactly when to strike. 3 days before jury selection, she was found dead in her jail cell. The cause was ruled suicide. But rumors swirled. Some believed she had been silenced. Others claimed she couldn't face the weight of what she had done. If Emily could be manipulated into luring Daniel to an isolated place, Benjamin would take care of the rest. Lavra would get what she wanted, Daniel out of the picture, Emily framed. And a clean slate to start a new life with Daniel's assets, or at least his insurance payout. The story follows her in whispers. Some see her as a victim, others as an accomplice. She rarely gives interviews, but once a reporter caught up to her outside a small grocery store. When asked what she regretted most, she said, "Not seeing it sooner. Not seeing any of it." Nothing came up. No tax filings, no vehicle registrations, no social media. He was a ghost. His sister, who never trusted Lavra, now runs a foundation for victims of relationship fraud. She calls what happened a layered kind of evil. Inside, they found an unregistered phone hidden behind a panel in the kitchen. On it were dozens of messages between her and Benjamin. The messages discussed Daniel and Emily. They included plans, movements, and even a conversation about a cabin. At first, everything pointed to her. She was found at the scene. She had lured Daniel to the cabin. He was alone, wearing a cap and sunglasses, and paid in cash. His car wasn't visible. The footage was grainy, but it was enough to prompt deeper digging. And when emotions escalated, Benjamin didn't stick to the plan. He killed Daniel, then vanished. She was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and fraud. The trial made headlines. Two women at the center of a deadly love triangle, manipulated by a ghost of a man with a hidden agenda. The media devoured the story. A forensic analyst ran the image through facial recognition software using broader databases, and it hit. There were no signs of forced entry, and she gave a confusing account of the events. To the public, it looked like a clear-cut crime of passion. A wife scorned, a love affair gone wrong, a tragic ending. But Detective Lavra Henley, assigned to the case, sensed something was missing. Then, through a search of nearby traffic cameras, detectives found footage of a man matching Tyler S.'s description entering a gas station just hours after Daniel S.'s death. The man known as Tyler Grant was actually Benjamin Lowe. Benjamin Lowe had a record spanning several states, mostly under different aliases. The answer came from an unexpected direction. A photo surfaced online showing Benjamin and another familiar face, Lavra Morgan, Daniel's ex-girlfriend. Detective Henley confronted her, but Lavra denied everything. A warrant was issued to search Laura's home. The plan was chilling. Lavra had reached out to Benjamin months earlier. She knew Daniel was unhappy in his marriage and sensed an opportunity. But somewhere along the line, things got messy. Emily wasn't as easy to control as they expected. Daniel became suspicious. With the discovery of the phone and the messages, Lavra was arrested. Emily's charges were re-examined in light of the new evidence. Lavra never made it to trial. Benjamin Lowe was never found. The last confirmed sighting placed him in Nevada, using yet another fake name, checking into a motel under an assumed identity. In the aftermath, Emily changed her name and moved out of state. She lives quietly now, avoiding attention. Daniel's family still holds annual memorials. The case left behind a trail of destruction: one marriage destroyed, 2 lives lost, 1 man vanished, and a community shaken. And somewhere, out in the world, Benjamin Lowe may still be watching, waiting for the next story to step into.